Cool. All right. So I'm Rich Cabrera. I'm the founder of Ready Player DAO. We are a gaming guild and investment DAO. Um, and part of what I'm going to talk about is why that whole ecosystem. So I want to start with current state, what we see in a lot of Web3 games and a lot of the guilds that are, building alongside those games, deploying gamers and their community inside those games. And basically what we're seeing today is a lot of these games are developing open economies with limited use case for their utility tokens, and they're following a lot of boom-bust hype cycles that have to deal with inflation, as well as most of the use cases for these utility tokens are breeding games. So there's supply-based use cases, which also have inherent issues with the NFT supply as well as the utility token supply. So there's a very limited and straightforward game theory that's applied to a lot of the tokens in terms of utility tokens and the NFTs as well. So Axie, for example, when you have earned your SLP from playing the game, the battle system in Axie Infinity, you have a few options, right? You can burn the token to mint a new NFT and potentially sell it or use it in a game, or you can sell said token. So the game theory is very, very simple, and it's a very straightforward approach as to what you want to do with the token depending on what your incentives are and how they align with the reason you're in the game and what you're playing for. And then guilds currently, the business model is based on asset acquisition and yield farming off of asset lending, which is inherently fairly extractive, and pretty much, exacerbates the whole issue with the extractive model of utility tokens and the current game ecosystems. So we've seen guilds jumping from game to game, following hype cycles. We've seen guilds dumping and exiting. There was a while back, I won't name any names, but a guild that kind of got a lot of backlash for that and was in hot water. And we're seeing this a lot with some of these guilds that are here purely from a yield generation standpoint, and it's a lot of these smaller guilds. Now we'll see larger ones that are doing something a little bit different, like YGG and some of the broader ones that are looking to do major asset acquisition and build a broader community and have a different business model based off of that community as a service type approach, which is something that we're doing at Ready Player DAO as well. You'll also see these guilds struggle to maintain their community as these hype boom and bust cycles play out, which is something that we're seeing in Axie as well. A lot of the smaller guilds are seeing a lot of their players just stop playing, move on to the next game, or move on to a different guild that has other opportunities. And then we'll see a lot of those guilds struggle if they're late to one of these boom or bust cycles. So basically, some of you guys might recognize some of these charts. These are some very popular utility tokens, Viz, SLP, and THC. So PegXC, Axie Infinity, and Thetan Arena, which are some of the popular games near the end of last year. And basically what we end up seeing here is the supply and demand crunch that I was talking about, right? So new game comes along, and there's a lot of interested parties. Guilds come in, they bring all their scholars. There's a high demand for the NFT assets to get into the game. So breeding becomes extremely profitable, and then people are buying token because they're not generating enough because there aren't enough players using the assets in the game. So then the token price spikes as well. Then the demand starts being met by the supply. Enough NFT assets are generated, and then the demand, and this is correlated with the NFT assets themselves as well. You'll see the prices plummet. And you can call this price discovery, whatever else, but essentially this is what happens when you have an open economy. Most of these games that are very straightforward in terms of earn and then either burn for a single use case and then exit, are following this model, and we're seeing them happen in a lot quicker cycle than what we saw with Axie. So the Pegasus Viz chart, which is this one right here, happened in about 3 months, jumping from, I think it was around 3 cents to 20 cents, and then now it's at 1 cent. SLP is also at 1 cent, and then THC is just below 1 cent. So we're seeing the market pretty much valuing these utility tokens at the end of the day at around 1 cent as well. So let's talk about where a lot of this is heading. So we're seeing a lot of the guilds starting to shift, and in 2 ways, right? So we'll separate the community aspect of it and the business model. So the community aspect of it, they're starting to focus on incentivizing gamers to join and gamifying their experience. We just saw YGG release their advancement program, which is a combination of bounty system and non-transferable social tokens that reward the gamers for achievements from playing in these games. So you're creating this gamified experience of being part of the community. There's an advancement, there's achievements to be had as being part of the guild and that community. And this is what brings the stickiness to the communities and the guilds themselves. And then also a wide berth of opportunities in a wide range of games and game genres. So if the scholar or the gamer, the players don't like a certain game, there's other opportunities within the guild. There's opportunities for advancement, achievement, etc. And then there's also community governance, which we haven't seen fully fleshed out, to date, but is something that I see coming as well. So a lot of these gamers in these guilds are going to be able to vote with the YGG Advancements program. We're seeing those non-transferable social tokens and obviously the YGG token being used as governance in a lot of these guilds, and it's something that we're building out as well. And then finally, we have the content creators. So as we look at the current Web2 marketplace market of content creators and esports teams and tournament hosting, we see programs like 100 Thieves and FaZe Clan with these massive fan bases, creating merch, creating experiences for their fans, being the top players in the games that they're playing in, etc. And we're starting to see a shift in guilds to that model as well. And I think in the broader aspect of things, most guilds, the smoothest transition would be to become content programs, esports teams, and start hosting tournaments and becoming content marketing powerhouses. So with that vein, moves us to the business model aspect of it. So that content platform, VOD content, YouTube, TikTok videos, etc., pushing the Web3 games that guilds are invested in is part of that business model. It's also community as a service for a lot of these games. In the current space, we're seeing a lot of games looking to onboard some of the larger guilds and their communities into their game because it's like a bootstrapping mechanism for a lot of these games. The hardest thing for games to do and what makes them successful is bringing a community of gamers that are excited about the game and becoming hardcore, fans and building lore around, even if it's not directly tied, not canon, around the games, building art, experiences, etc. And that's what we're seeing making a lot of these games successful. And then the guild model essentially allows some of these games to take a bootstrapping method to building that community and fostering it and building the lore and getting them excited, especially with bringing them all into their Discord and gamifying those experiences as well. So a lot of the games are bringing guilds on into early stage, either private equity or token rounds, or giving them discounted NFT assets. And then on top of that, we're also seeing some guilds pivoting to become tech companies or doing advisorships for a lot of these games. So we see Guild5, for example, building out tech tooling for other guilds in terms of automation tooling for their gamers, governance use cases, and also bounty systems, etc. So Loot Squad is also doing that. They just released Loot Bolt, which is a bounty system that connects directly to Discords and allows you to give out any kind of token in reward for completing certain tasks, whether that's in-game, out-game, etc. So in short, basically, we're seeing the guilds move towards content marketing, potentially, don't want to restart my device right now, potentially advisorships, and then following a lot of those investments and becoming esports and content marketers. So this is the big one, where we see gaming heading in the next few years. So there's a lot of, I think, very basic issues that we've seen with the initial model of Web3 games of play the game, earn token, breed or sell token, right? Very streamlined, very straightforward, simplistic game theory. So I think a lot of what we're going to see is token economics developed to recycle a lot of the utility tokens or restrict it from leaving in a very simplistic manner. And a lot of the games that I've talked to personally or are working alongside are developing more complex logic in their game theory and also making it a little bit more difficult to just pull that out. So taking Axie, for example, they just released Origin, which instead of earning directly SLP, they're earning moon shards. And moon shards are a soul-bound token that is not tradable, that is used for crafting alongside the SLP that you'll be earning in-game. And the primary earning from playing the games will be moon shards with an uncertain amount of SLP because it hasn't been fleshed out yet. But the idea behind it is essentially most of your tokens and most of what you're earning is going to be soul-bound and tied to your account directly. You're going to have to be doing leveling up and crafting to be able to get most of the real rewards, which encourages additional recycling of the assets that you earn in the game back into the game ecosystem. And the crafting encourages you to build more high-value assets for how you're playing the game. The other thing I would like to see, so that is still, in my opinion, very directly narrow to certain play styles. So crafting to improve, the in-game competitiveness and building shards, building charms and runes to improve your team's chance in the arena, right? There are also personality styles that come with gamers that are playing games, which I'll touch up on a little bit on the next slide. But the thesis is that, for example, there are an introvert versus an extrovert, right? So an introvert going to a bar is going to have a different experience than an extrovert. And they're going to be incentivized in different ways through the activities that they're doing. So an extrovert will be incentivized to go to a bar, meet with their friends, etc. An introvert might be incentivized from staying home, relaxing, reading a book, etc. And this applies, and that's a very simplistic way to explain it, but this applies also to gamers, right? So the way I play games might be different than the way you guys play games in terms of how aggressive my play style might be in an FPS shooter, or there's the sniper who likes to stay back and stay out of danger, but take calculated shots. There's the guy who rushes in, etc. And they're all looking for different experiences in the way that they play their games. So incentivizing burn mechanisms by playing into these personality traits, I think, is very important to building sufficient economic cycles for a lot of these tokens. Another thing that's very important is wrapping these burn mechanisms in lore. So the current burn mechanisms of, hey, let's breed and create a new Axie, or let's breed and create a new Pega horse, etc., is not that exciting, right? A lot of the gamers are playing games as, generally as an escape from the current day-to-day, to enjoy their experience, etc. And they like to dig into the lore. Some of the the most exciting games have very rich, in-depth lore and storytelling behind it. And wrapping those burn mechanisms in the lore, I think, is extremely important. Storytelling is a very undervalued aspect of gaming in current Web3 gaming ecosystem. And then I talked about retaining assets in the gaming loops until progression is made. So leveling up to be able to burn to create some of the higher value assets, or being able to mint at a certain level of some of the NFT assets to be able to sell those and pull them out of the game. And lastly, not least, realize that not every game needs a token or NFT. So we've seen Web3 games that just have NFT, and I've seen Web3 games that just have token. And that's because people are starting to realize that the combination of both is not necessary in every game and doesn't make sense in every game. So if you've seen something like Play Blankos, it's just NFTs as collectibles, skins, and characters, but there is no token. So they haven't had a lot of these issues, but they also haven't had the massive boom that comes from being able to, quickly earn from playing a game and extracting it. And then I've played a different game called Mithraeum, which there's no core NFT needed to play into it, but there is token tied into a lot of the civilization building and the gaming aspect of itself, and a lot of other interesting factors that come along with that as well. Going back to the personality types, so these are the player archetypes put out by Game Refinery. I recently put out a blog post that touches up on this a little bit in a different manner, because I think there is a lot of overlap between a lot of these as well. But basically, back to my core point was, the expressionist versus the thrill seeker versus the skill master versus the networker are all looking for different experiences out of the games that they're playing. And this goes within each genre of gaming itself. So something for Axie, for example, the expressionist might be looking to burn their token to reskin their Axie, make it vibrant, make it look cool, etc. This is the social draw of the personality type, right? The networker might be looking to create a team, join a guild that's the top players, looking for the best team, etc. The thrill seeker might be looking for the most go-getting team, power-ups, aggressive play style, and then the strategist might be looking something more balanced, defensive, etc. So they're all looking for different types of things, different approaches. You see this in most games, like WoW, FPS games like Call of Duty, etc., where people are looking for different experiences and are there for different things. Not everybody's putting all their money into skins, right? Some people are putting it into social experiences. Some people are putting it into being the top player, etc., reinvesting into things that will make themselves play better. So essentially building the game loops and the burning mechanisms around these personality types is extremely important for building sufficient burn mechanisms that every player in the gaming ecosystem will want to burn their tokens and reinvest into those games. One that's not in here that will be extremely important in Web3 is the earner. So another thing that Web3 games will have to take into account is that there will always be people coming to try to earn from playing the game. And that's something that these games will have to design around as well, and will have to expect. And that's not that new either. We've seen, World of Warcraft and other games where there's secondary markets for tokens. Even Elden Ring, you can go on eBay right now and buy like a 1 million rune account for $40. So it's there, it exists. There's these gray markets, but now it's a lot more open, and we have to plan for them and design around them. So yeah, going back towards some of the progression that we've seen in some of the games we've talked about, I mentioned soulbound items and tokens. We talked about leveling up to mint. So one of the very interesting approaches that I've seen are, you gain an item in the game. You actually have to reinvest your tokens into that item to level it up. You have to progress it. You have to gain experience and add experience to that item to level it up. And then once it reaches a certain level, it becomes mintable, and then you can sell it potentially, or you can keep it and keep upgrading it. And that's also where other players who potentially don't have much time and want to invest in the game can go in and buy those higher value assets, skip the grind part of things, and start playing from there. Burn to mint is also part of that as well. I've seen another token economic structure where players are able to find assets in a game and then burn their token to mint those assets. And if you don't like those assets, maybe it's like a common tier asset that you already have 100 of. No need to burn, move on, right? So multi-game integration and interoperability, this is something that a lot of people are excited about with Web3 gaming. So being able to port your characters over into other games or game modes within the same gaming ecosystem is something that we're seeing as well. And that can include a burn mechanism of the token. NFT fusing and releasing. So like I mentioned, maybe you have 100 of the common items. Being able to fuse them together, which is actually a method that was just released, I think yesterday or 2 days ago by Pegexy, being able to fuse two common NFT assets together to create a more rare one and burn tokens in doing so. And potentially the more rare one gives you additional experiences in games or additional earning capacity. I mentioned asset loops with earners in mind. And there's also seasonal NFTs and then tokenless Web3 games, which like Blankos that I mentioned. The one thing about seasonal NFTs that I really like and following the battle pass system is that it ensures there's respect to rarity in a lot of the NFT assets. So with a lot of the NFT games that we've seen today, being able to mint an infinite amount of NFTs that don't have any differentiation between some of the older NFTs outside of maybe their skill set that rolls with those specific NFT assets, we see a hyperinflation of those assets, and then people lose interest in, and the value is lost in some of those because there's so many of them. So with seasonal NFTs, similar to skins and a lot of the FPS shooters that we know today, it's like you have a season 0, more rare, early gamer NFT is going to be a higher value price point than some of the newer ones and could have different aspects inside the game as well. And then threat of wipe is one I haven't talked about yet, but I think is very interesting. So essentially, the more token assets you hoard, the more of a target you become inside of a game. This is built more for PvP style games, and this is something I saw in a 4X type game. But essentially, the less you use your tokens and hoard them, the more of a target you become, and the more of a threat there is of you being wiped out and losing some of those tokens and some of the assets that you've earned in the game. So that wraps it up. Thank you guys. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter, follow our DAO, etc.